Hi there. Welcome to an exciting new edition of What is Going On with This Piece. I'm Alan Matthews, and today's piece is this little Bourree by good old J.S. Bach. I have to admit, I love Bach. I'm a Bachophile. I find Bach absolutely transcendent. There is no easy Bach. I've never encountered any easy Bach. Even this little piece, which you look at on the page, looks easy, but it's not easy. None of it's easy. I haven't found any Bach that's easy. Well, I actually haven't found any music that's easy. If you bring to it a really high standard and you want to get it just right, then there is no such thing as easy music at that point. But I've really found it to be the case with Bach as well. I love this little Bourree. So let me just play it for you. I haven't practiced it or anything like that. I'm just going to sight read it through here. And that is the little Bach Bourree. I'm sure that it could be played better, but that's one run through of it anyway. So let's get into this and just take a look. So I want to, before we actually get into this, I just want to say for just a second, please check out, if you haven't watched it, after you watch this, or before, whatever, go and check out my How to Learn Any Piece in 7 Easy Levels, because I don't talk about it a whole lot, those steps, whenever I go through these pieces, but I'm assuming that you will do those steps as well. So if you haven't watched that series, please, there's a link below. Please go and watch that, because it'll just make learning these pieces so much easier. And I'll try to, when I think about it, I'll kind of throw something about that in. But this assumes that you know how to go about learning the piece. And then this is also additional to that. When you master that 7-step process, then all this stuff after this goes in addition to this right here. So let's take a look here. One of the first things I would notice here would be this key signature. The key of, do you know it? It's A. Key of A. And so one of the things that I would do to begin with for this piece would be to, if you know your 5 scale shapes, like we've talked about, I'll put a link to those down below as well. Then this would be the key of A. Then I would look especially for this piece at the G shape, major scale. And then it starts on the, you would start it on the 5th fret with your pinky, or yes, on the A with your pinky. So it's the G shape with the pinky, the 4th finger starting on the 5th fret down below. But that would be the A shape, and this piece uses those shapes a lot in it. So that's just something to do as well. So we got the A shape. We've also got this right here, which is this time signature right here. And a lot of people just blow past the time signature and see, okay, cut time, 4/4, common time, whatever. It's all the same unless it's something I need to really pay attention to. Cut time says something specific. This actually says something specific. There's a reason that it's not 4/4 time. It's still written with 4 quarter notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, in the bar, right? But it's not written as 4/4 or common time. It's written as cut time. And so the difference in this is that it's felt in 2. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4. This is not the piece. It's felt in 2. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's a big difference in the feel of this song. So whenever you're actually playing this song, dum 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 da da, it's like an ebb and flow, back and forth. The waves go out, the waves come in, or I should say the waves come in, the waves go out, is a better way of seeing it actually with the bar. The downbeat, the waves come in, the upbeat, the waves go out. 2 big beats per bar, not 4. So it's just good to know that going right in, right? What else could I see just off the bat in looking at this piece? Okay, we've got a pickup note right here, right? We'll talk about that later. There's this repeat sign right here. So our form is then going to be A, and then what happens? Okay, here's another repeat. It goes all the way to here. So then we can assume it's going to be B, right? B, B. But then upon closer look, this first A section is only 4 bars, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. The second section is more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So wait a second, something's going on here. So then we could look at it and say, is this second section equal to the first section, or is something going on? And we can look at that later. But we can, well, just glancing down, we can see that, well, this measure right here looks surprisingly like this measure right here, and lo and behold, it actually is. The whole line is the same. So really what happens is that we have AA, BA, BA, and you could say A prime on these because it is slightly different. Once you get into playing it, there are a couple of little things that are a little bit different down here. This bass note, the way that we don't have these, the walking down bass down at the end like that. These things are a little bit different. So you could call it A prime and put your little 1 up there. But basically this is your form. AA, BA, BA. So let's then get a clean score here and say, okay, so now we know more or less what's going on, yes? So now we can actually start looking at the piece itself. And so the first thing I would notice, well, we've already noticed a bunch of stuff, so I can't say the first thing again. But one of the things to notice is that we have a bass line, stems going down, right? Here, here, here. We have this bass line, and then we also have this upper line, here, 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 right? So we have 2 lines of music going on, like this right here, throughout the entire thing. Because of this, we're going to want to learn this piece in 2 different ways. We're going to have to learn it vertically, like this. These 2 notes go together and these 2, and then it offsets. And so we can learn it vertically because that's what the hands do. We also learn it, and that's what you'll be doing in the 7 steps process, right? If you go and watch that, then you'll be doing it in a basically it's how do I put my hands? What's going on exactly is physically with my hands, and that's vertically. But musically, we're going to have to actually look at this as 2 different horizontal lines. So we're going to have to look at just the red line, and we're also going to have to look at just the blue line. And so we got to do those things separately. Why do we have to do those separately? And can't I just skip that process because it means more sight reading, and I'm not good at sight reading, Alan? Can't I just skip it? And the answer is, sure, if you want it to not be very pretty, you can do that. Otherwise, just get the sight reading practice and do it. So the reason that we do that is because it's not one line of music. And if you don't listen to the start line separately, it will become very bland, and it'll just be this like heavy-footed plodding thing, instead of each line separately with its own separate nuances and its own separate things to do, such as that's just the upper line. So if you can really incorporate that into your subconscious mind so that you know exactly what that line sounds like, and you can follow all your good phrasing, which we'll talk about in just a minute, all your good phrasing rules on that one line without the mess of the bottom line stuck in there, then the whole thing is going to end up being more beautiful. It also sets you up to manage all the difficulties that come when we do the exact same thing for the bass line, which is the C sharp, T, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. It's got its own deal as well, so we have to phrase that beautifully as well. Oftentimes people will throw the bass away and just say, well, I just play it wherever it comes and however I want to because my mind's on the melody, and as long as the melody is beautiful, the bass can do whatever it wants and there's really no way you can mess it up. But that's not really true. You can actually make it 10 times more beautiful by phrasing the bass. So let's review a couple of our basic phrasing rules that we've talked about in other videos. The first one being, if a line is going up, then get quieter. If it's going down, get louder. And yes, sometimes this is not the way to do it, but 95 to 98% of the time, this works better than the opposite. So let's just take a look at that, shall we? Let's take a look at that. How about in green? And we're just going to look first off at just the melody line. So just the up stems. So here we have a repeated note, boom, boom, right? So how are we going to deal with that? I don't know. We'll talk about it in a minute when we get to that. But here to here, where it's going up, right? From A to B is going up. So this note will be softer. So this will end up going like this right here. I'll come up here for the dynamics. It'll be getting softer to that. Here we have, it's going down, so it'll get louder. Coming back up, it'll get softer again. Whoops. It'll get softer again, going up for this area right here, those three notes. And then we'll get louder again for that. Softer for the B, louder for the G. We're going down. And then softer going up again for that. So as we just look through, then we can kind of get our basic roadmap of how this goes through here, right? By looking at just the way that the line goes. If it goes up, we get quiet. If it goes down, it gets louder. And so that's step number one, right? There are exceptions to this rule, but that's a good starting place, is to just do it that way first, and then if you want to make an exception to the rule, then you can make an exception. So we could do that. So now let's just listen to that in that way. Actually, before we do, let's talk about this repeated note at the beginning. So with this repeated note at the beginning, let's just get rid of this right here for just a second. With the repeated note, we oftentimes, in general, when we have repeated notes, we crescendo, especially if there's 3 or more repeated notes. Then we start the first one quiet and we crescendo, right? And this works for this one as well, but there's another reason that this works as well. And that is that this is a pickup note right here, right? That's a pickup note. This is the downbeat. This is the downbeat, not this. So it's not, let me play it both ways. That's one way to play it. Or to get this 2/4 or the cut time thing in, then it's going to need to be less, more. We want to emphasize the downbeat to say this is where the actual beat is. Dum, ba, dum, ba, da, dum. So just to start off the piece, we're going to want to bring emphasis to that downbeat so that we know where our pulse is. So we don't want to accent this at the very beginning. Now later, it might be very cool to accent the upbeat just to kick us forward and keep the music moving forward. But at the very beginning, we want to make sure that first and foremost, everybody knows where we are. Everybody knows where the basic pulse of the piece is, so that we can just sit back and enjoy it and not be confused right off the bat. We can confuse people later if we must, but right from the very beginning, we need to create a home base, get some comfort level going. Then we can start messing with things. But that's as musicians and entertainers, that's our job. Number one is just get everybody feeling safe and knowing what's going on. Then we have a little bit of leeway to play with it later. So in this case, then, we are going to crescendo this line. basically means don't bring out that first note, right? So, coming back to this one right here, there's a lot of stuff going on this page now. Let me just play that for you then, with these dynamics in it, so you can actually hear it. Less, more, and oops. So that's the way that goes, yes? Now, you may notice I did some other stuff in here, and this is where we're going next. So let's come back to here, actually. So let's look at this right here. Yes, we've got a bunch of rules that I throw out at you as far as phrasing stuff goes. And here's another one, and that has to do with tied notes. And this piece has it in spades, and I think it's great for that. So whenever we have a tied note, what we want to do is we want to offset that tied note from the note before it so that we know immediately upon playing it that it is a tied note. And we didn't just miss the next note, it is actually a tied note on purpose. And so if we actually create some space between, in this case, the A and the B right here, right? If we create some space right there, then it kicks that B, it kicks the tied note forward. This also happens with syncopations oftentimes. It kicks that note forward and makes it lean, and you know that it's tied immediately. So in other words, dum, bum, ba, kick it, put a little space. It might sound like it's a little bit late, and maybe it is, but good. At least it'll push it that direction. And I'm talking about a millionth of a second. Push it slightly forward this way, but by putting a big space right there. So let me just play that for you. Dum, bum, bum. It's just slightly late. You could also stop the note if you wanted to stop the A. You could also do that, but it's not totally necessary. You also know that that's going to be a tied note. Dum, bum, ba, dum, ba. I'll play it with the bass just so you can actually hear it both ways. You know it's tied as soon as I play it. Well, I let the bass tie that time. So that way it kicks it forward. If you'll notice, there's a lot of tied notes in this piece. Here's another one, right? And really, these rests, we'll talk about those rests in a minute, but really these are kind of, we could think of these as the same way as well. Because of the rest, they act as tied notes. So, looking then at this, we have soft, right? Getting louder, offsetting that beat. Now, here's the scoop. Oftentimes when we offset things, we want to accent them. Right? Bum. And that really makes it obvious that it's a tie as well. In this case, we're going up. And so it's not best necessarily, it might be, but it's not necessarily best to accent it just because it's a tie, because it's going up. Now, because it's a tie, we could get away with letting it be louder than the note before it, but I probably wouldn't just because it's the downbeat and we're trying to establish. I would keep it either the same or less as far as volume goes for this B right here. Come down for that. Now, let's move on from that then. So now we have that offset. And that happens in a couple of different places, right? Glancing through the piece, you can also see that it happens here. You can see that it happens here. And then of course down here, because this is the repeat of the top line. So we have it there, we have it there. So there's a bunch of places that this happens. When you're practicing, you could actually look at each of these places after you've gone through and gotten your notes, done the 7 steps. I'm going to keep mentioning them because a lot of people have been mentioning to me that it's missing from it. So once you get that, you know where your fingers are going, you know what's going on and everything, then working through this, you could do this and then play these tied spots next to each other. So instead of just playing from here and just play all the way to here and then just play that a million times, instead you could just play just this little bit and then this little bit, which seems to be going through anyway in line. But then you could jump down and just play this one. You could play just this one and skip a bunch of the other spots in between so that your focus was on one thing and you were doing them consistently the same way each time. Does that make sense? That way you're creating cohesion throughout the pieces. The different pieces of the piece are cohesive and similarly worked out. So that way it really seems cut from the same cloth. It's consistent throughout. The same issues are consistently handled throughout is what I'm trying to say here. So then moving forward on this, we have, what do we got next then? Oh yes, then we come to this note right here, right? We are here. Here. There's an interesting thing in music, and it's called the half step. And half steps are inherently interesting. Whenever we have a half step, we have a real sense of arrival. We have a real sense of movement. Oftentimes harmonies change by manipulating half steps. And it certainly does in this piece. This piece starts out with a half step, C sharp, D in the bass. And so half steps are really interesting. So it would be a really good exercise to go through and identify all the half steps in this entire piece. And then so looking through them, here's one right here. Let's go a big color here. Here is one, a half step. G sharp, A. Where else? Oh look, here it is again, G sharp, A. So that is just really good to note where that is. You could go through the second section as well, find all your half steps, and really recognize that those are important sections not to be glossed over. Technically, nothing should be glossed over when you're going this deeply into them. So those are the half steps. So because we have this half step, that's really interesting. We also have that this is a big old upbeat. And so it's also lower than the notes around it, right? So we're gonna crescendo that a bit anyway, and then decrescendo up. So naturally we could bring a little more emphasis to this G sharp. Let's play it and listen to that. Bottom, bottom, boom. So we could bring some more emphasis to that G sharp because it is inherently an interesting note because we get to resolve it by half step. The other thing is this resolution right here. This is the next issue, I should say, is this right here, this string of 3 notes, right? 1, 2, 3, those 3 notes right there. 1, 2, 3. Now, there is a thing called the long short, and we've talked about this in other videos as well, but if you haven't seen those or need a refresher, here it is. Whenever we have more than 3 or more notes equal duration, like these eighth notes, following a longer note, in this case a quarter note, it could have been 3/4 following a half note or something like that, but whenever you have, or 3/16 following an eighth, it could be anything like that. Whenever you have these multiple smaller notes following a longer note, make the first of the shorter notes quiet. So we basically decrescendo to the first note, and then you can move on from there. There's a way to handle ascending lines like this, and there's a different way to handle descending lines had it been going down. Or in this case, this little like this little ornament right here, or this little this neighbor tone, what do you call it, mordant, right there. So if you go through and look at this long short, what we have is a loud G sharp, and ideally, this is in a perfect world, but on the guitar this basically just means play it quietly. Ideally, that first note of the long short is the exact volume that the preceding long note has decayed too. So we have this note, we hit it and it starts dying. And there's a volume right here. So it's like if we have this balloon and we pop it up and it just slowly sinks back down, we catch it at the exact same spot of where this has been decaying. So instead of starting over, we pop it here, the balloon sinks back down here. Instead of hitting it here, what we do is the balloon is slowly so we catch it way down there and then pop it back up. That way it prolongs the long line. And so what we're trying to do is to create as few beginnings as possible and more continuances, so that it's one line. The entire song is one line, but also the entire line of music until the repeat sign is one line. And so we can go through and we make it all the way from here, we go all the way to there, and then whenever, even there, we connect it both to the repeat and then forward the next time. So this is one of our goals in music here, is to create long lines, continue to have things continuing instead of stopping and starting all over. So there's a couple of other things that also do this. That's don't accent the high note. And a lot of people accent the high note and it sucks. You shouldn't accent the high note. It just doesn't sound good. Because, why? Because it creates an arrival point and it's rarely the most interesting note. It's more interesting to continue on. It creates a stopping point when you accent a high note and it makes everything after that inconsequential. So like this C right here, right? This C is a high note. And so we don't want to accent that. So we want a decrescendo, and it's been going up to a line, so we want to decrescendo this line, right? That line wants to decrescendo. We don't want to accent the C up here. We don't want to accent that, but we want this note to be quiet. We want the A to be quiet. And so now we're faced with an issue, right? Which is we play this loud, and then we have to be quiet for this note, right? And we have to be quiet for this note right there, which means we have to have something, or else we're just going to be playing really quietly all the time. Something has to happen. That means that we're going to have to bring out that middle note. This note right here, the B, that's a lot of ink on the page. This B is we're going to crescendo largely to that and then back off. That enables us to do three things. It enables us to have the long short for the first note, right? So we have a long short. So the long short, so you know what I'm talking about, L-O-N-G-S-H-O-R-T, long short. When we have a long note, then we have a short note. The short note's quiet. So we have that. It enables us to do that. Let's get some green happening here. We've got that green. And then we've got this crescendo. We're going to crescendo to that B. And then we're going to decrescendo off because it's the high note. So we get to both have the overall scope of the line getting quieter, which is this big decrescendo right here that we talked about right there, right? Geez, this is getting messy. And it enables us to do all of those things and to not accent the high note. So it enables us to do all of those things. Whew, clean score now after that. So that's a lot of stuff right there. But you have to get nitpicky on these lines like this. And so what we have is more on the second A, offset the B, accent the G sharp, back off, more on the B, back off on the C. So then our B is the loudest note of that. The middle note is the loudest note of that. We just accent it. Great. So then what's next down here? Now we have this A, which is a jump down, so we're going to crescendo to that. Now here's something interesting. Let's do it down here. These rests right here, I'm not entirely convinced of these rests. And the reason is that we made special effort over here to actually tie this note. We also tied this note, but now all of a sudden we're not tying these other notes. And so I'm wondering, this falls on the 2, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. And then this, 1, 2, 4. And then so my question to you is, why tie this one right here and this one right here, but not this one right here? Why not? And so I can't think of a good answer for that, unless we just want the contrast of this real, like this juxtaposition back and forth, but I don't really buy that either. And so I would say my suggestion then would be to tie these and just think of it as a tied note and think of this as a tied note. So that you're actually thinking of it that way and not articulating those rests. They could just been put in as convenience. I don't know why they're there, but I don't play them. And a lot of people, there's also this big camp, I have to address this really quick. There's this camp of people that say the score is God and you cannot mess with anything. And if it's on the page, then it has to be exactly that way. And if you do, then woe be to you, sir, because you're a bad person. And I just can't buy it. As performers, it's our responsibility to play well. And so if we find something on the score that could be better for a good reason, I would start with the rest and then if you have a good reason and you know enough to actually make educated choices on things, then you can mess with these scores a little bit. You always want to start with what's on the page, but you can also look at it really analytically and say, is this the best choice? Because oftentimes, now Bach, granted, there's not too much arguing with Bach, except that I just did. But there's a lot of composers that are pretty arguable because they just don't necessarily have the best musical sense. Bach, there's nothing really you can say bad about the guy, really. He's certainly above me as far as on the intelligent music making scene. So, getting back to this, because it's a tied note, we could treat it just like the other tied notes and separate it. We could also, I didn't say it before, but we could also separate that one. Da-dum, bum, da-dum, dum. This one right here. For this one. But you can then do this. So you basically separate that one. This one, there's no too much separating it, but you could do it if you wanted to. But just think of them as tied and hold them through the duration. In other words, don't actually kill the note on purpose is my point. So just play through those rests and keep it. Because of that, what you have is this time of, if you were climbing, I use this example a lot because everybody does this. It's a common experience we all share. If you're climbing a glass building with the suction cups on your knees and on your hands or your elbows or whatever, you have to make sure there's always a suction cup stuck, right? Or else you'll fall down into the sidewalk below and die a gruesome death. So you have to make sure that there's always one on. So you stick one, and then you hold it while you move the other one, and then you stick that one while you move the other one, and there's always one on. It's the same thing like this. You're moving these notes between the bass and the treble. There's always a note on. So there's no weird gaps or anything. So to do that really takes understanding both lines, and it takes fingering it in such a way that you can hold the note while you play the bass, and then you play the bass, and you hold the bass while you play the next treble. So you're really keeping both lines going at the same time. It might take some practice, but it definitely takes some ear work, just recognizing those spots and really keeping sustained through them. So then just basically just keep those going, yes? Then we're still dealing with the upper line. We haven't even touched the bottom line yet, the bass line. So then we have this note right here, which is what? You know what I'm going to say? It's our half step again, right? G sharp, A, accent it, right? And then back off to the A. Now, a lot of people would say, well, the A is the culminating note of the whole phrase, so why not come into it with a bang? And that is a viable option as well. Let me play it for you both ways. seems a little pedantic to me, a little childish, a little yay, we've gotten to the end of the line, we made it. I don't think it's nearly as beautiful as ba-dum, boom, boom. It also allows us to connect da-dum, boom, boom, da-da-dum. Again, when we go up to a note and make it loud, da-dum, it makes it the end. But just because it's at the end of the line doesn't necessarily it's not the end of the piece. At the very end of the piece, that might be a really good thing to do, to state it. The second, all the way down here, the second time we do it, I mean, the first time we're going to repeat, right? And so we wouldn't want to do it that time, but we might want to actually crescendo that the second time, the very last time, right? Just to make the ending really solid ending, because it says it's the end. The question is, do you want to say it's the end when it's not the end? And if you don't, which ideally we don't, we want to create longer lines, then we basically we back off to that note. Yes? You have to be really touchy about these things. Each note has its own little place within the line in order to bring things forward. And that's why we deal with the lines separately and not just vertically, because there's just too much going on. So that's a lot of stuff, but that's the upper line. That's that first line. That is the first line, upper part. So now let's look at this bass line right here. What do you say? So the first thing that I can notice here with this bass line is that we have, do you know what I'm going to say? We have a half step. And we have an ascending line, which means that we have this note being louder, right? Getting softer to this note. So we're going to back off to that note, right? Now, that goes in complete opposition to what the upper line is doing, because the upper line is doing the exact opposite, right? Don't worry about that yet. Just get the bottom line as true as possible unto itself, and then deal with the problems of putting them together. And there will be problems. And this is where balance comes into issue. There was another one, I can't remember what piece it was, that was all about this balance. I'll put a link to that below as well if you, or I might not. But anyway, we have loud, soft, da, da. Now we get into this issue, and this issue is marked throughout this entire piece, and that is the upbeat, the big second beat of each measure. So we have downbeat 1, 2, 1, 2. And so to make this properly move forward in the music, then we want that upbeat to really be the kicker that drives us forward. It's not 1, 2, 1, 2. That's lame, and then we're starting over at 1 every time. We want it to be 1, then here, then here. That would be, just to write these words out right here, that would be 1. So here, and here, and here. So the purpose of this note is to get us to that note. Purpose of that note is to get us there, and then to there. So that then the second beat is always the kicker. How do we do that? There's a couple of different ways. You don't want it to always be louder, because you don't want to, I mean, unless you're playing a samba, then it's always louder. But you basically want it to be kicking that direction. So how do you do it? And the answer is timing. The answer is you make it ever so slightly late. Listen to this. 1, and here, and here. It's just ever so slightly late. And here. And just for kicks, I would practice it in that way. Really, you know what I think of it as is if there's like this membrane that to actually play the note, you have to push through the membrane. So yes, beat might be right here, but there's this slight resistance to where it's like, it just takes a little bit to get through it. and here, and here. So it's It's a tough one to explain, and it certainly is a tough one to explain in words because it's a little bit, it's visceral. It's using rhythm as an expressive device, and it's creating the feeling of being pulled forward. And that kind of thing is really hard to talk about, but it's easy to hear when you hear it. Like if you hear somebody getting it, you're like, oh, that's perfectly placed, which is another word. You could place it is so, and here, place it here, and here, and here, and here, and here. Now the downbeats, you want to be just right on the one, clean as a whistle. You want to be just right there. Boom, 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 boom. Those you want dead on. But the second beat, the big beat, kick it forward. Here, slightly late. Here, and here. And here, but not necessarily louder. And this is where the kind of the battling all these different things come in, because I want to play it. And here, and here, and here, and here. But it doesn't really work because that's not the way the pulse of the song goes. And I love Brazilian music, and that's the way samba does as well. And so I want to do that, but you can't all the time because it isn't the strong beat. It's technically the weak beat of the measure. But what you can do is make it late. And here, and here, and here, and here, and here. Although, and here's another consideration for you that actually affects this, and that is that the relationship of these notes, this note, if we look at these two notes right here, let's get a different color here. If we look, let's just go clean score. If we look at the relationship of this E to this F sharp, it's going up, right? And so it would naturally, we would think there, right? We would think of it getting softer. Same thing here, especially here, because we have what? We have a half step, C sharp to D. So we would want to bring out the C sharp and back off the D. Here, same type of thing. It happens to be switching voices at this point, but it is still A to E, or I'm sorry, E to A is still, so that would actually decrescendo as well. So in this case, you could actually get away with bringing extra emphasis to the upbeats and then backing off on it. But you can't always. So I just don't, it's a tricky thing because you can't always do that. But in this case, you can. So, like for right here, just looking at this, here to here, you wouldn't right there. You wouldn't make this louder than this because you're actually going down. You want to crescendo that. So you can't always. But in this case, in the first line, you can make the second beats louder. These are the kind of things that keep me up at night. These issues. It's like, do I make it louder? Do I not make it louder? It's balancing all these. It's like a big game of politics or something. Excuse me. So then we have this lower line. So let's just play it. And here, and here, and half step up, and here. And that would be a line. Or and here, and here. That would be another way to do it. I get a lot of mileage out of the words and here, and then to here, and then here. Things like that. They provide kind of a construction in English that brings things forward because I know that and means that there's something else coming and here is an arrival. And so if you actually can put these words to things, then you will say, where's my arrival? And then what's going to the arrival? And then it kind of allows you to structure the purpose of each note and its particular function in the larger scheme. It doesn't mean that every single time you say here is a big loud arrival point, because that it could just, the here isn't the arrival, it's the journey that's the arrival. And so that's the point. The journey is the exciting part. So downplay the here play up the and then to, or the and here, the and, any of those other words. So that creates all these lines. So now let's look at the way that these intersect, these lines. And this is, so let's just go through here again. So here we're going to go louder, going to softer. Here we said louder to softer, to louder, to softer, to louder, to softer. And isn't that interesting? Because here you'd say, but wait a second, this one right here is lower than that, so it would actually be the opposite. But because it's in the bass, and because of the function of these is to give a pulse on the beats and to give us that coming in and out, the waves going in and out to distinguish our cut time feel, then it basically trumps that other, it trumps the other rule. And there's constantly going to be little things that are like this where you have to decide from one over the other, things like that. And that's where individual taste comes in as well. So that's that. On top of that, we have, this is getting louder. We're going to do the top line now. Dum, da, boom. Back off to that. Louder here. Softer to here. Softer to here. Well, it's actually, we have this little, right? That one's, we do that kind of deal within it. This is louder, softer, louder, softer. And then we could crescendo that ending to get to the next thing. Or we could do the opposite. We could actually go that way. We could do either one of those depending on how we felt that day and what we were doing going forward. Or are we coming, for these two right here, just a really quick here on this. If this is going back to the repeat, right, that, then we might handle it differently than if it was going forward to the next section. And so we might do it differently because of that, because of what's going on in the next section or how we want to actually make that turn into the next thing. So that's kind of context specific. So let's look at this then and see where it's different between the two. So here it's different, right? Between these right here. Here we have the top is soft and the bottom is loud. So we've been playing that. You need to be able to play to where the C sharp is louder than the A. And just practice that. And then the next note, you want to play it to where the A is louder than the D. That gives us, so we have that movement of each going the right direction. Because there are two things and because it's vertically, then you can actually think of it in that way. The first one you balance this way, the second one you balance this way, and it creates the two lines coming, the upper line and the lower line. First line, first note, low, big on the bottom, and then the upper first one, I'm sorry, the downbeat, bring out, then we would bring out the A, bring down the D. And so that's the way to handle that. It's a techie little practice problem for you in that balance. It's like that kind of nitpicky stuff just like will drive you crazy, but it makes everything very touchy. So then what happens? From here to here, this looks nice. Then we start offsetting, right? Then we just start bouncing back and forth with notes until we get right here. But luckily, this right here, everything's cool because they're going the same direction. That's going that way, that's going that way. We can just back off, and so that makes it much easier for right there. Da-da-dum. Then we're back and forth again, this type of thing. And so there shouldn't be any more, as long as you can keep track of what's what and play each one exactly how you like it unto itself, disregarding what the other line is doing. So you play the treble, remember to base that treble decision on the last treble note, not on the last bass note, because it's a different line. Same thing with the bass, keep that organized in your head. So then that's a lot of stuff right there, isn't it? It's a lot. So here we are with a fresh score, and guess what we're going to do now? Are you excited? Because I certainly am. We are going into the B section. Going into the B section right here. Let me just take a sip here. Okay. Here we have the exact same issue, right? I'm gonna shortcut and not go through every single note of this, but you would need to. We'll briefly talk about them. You'd need to go through both lines again. Do your 7 steps first to see how the fingers all work together and everything, but then go through the lines separately to work this out musically. And that is same thing right here. We have repeated notes in the upper line. We're looking at the upper line, and then going up again, right? So we're gonna back that off. Crescendo that, back that off, and we basically have the exact same thing going on, right? Except that now we're going down. This is still going to be a long short, right? This is a C sharp, and so it's going to get accented, like accent that note, and then back it off to that. Accent and a crescendo looks pretty much the same, or a decrescendo looks pretty much the same at this small scale, but you know what I'm talking about. Quiet, loud, quiet, basically is how you would play this. You would play less, more, less for those 3 notes right there. And then we have something different, and that is this B right here. And so now we have, and we haven't really had this before, which is a melody note, a stem up on the 3rd beat. It's always been throughout this entire piece. Here, here, here. There's never been a upper note on the 3rd beat. And so we have to ask, did they really mean to do this? Or is this truly an anomaly that's something different for this spot right here? So let's just play this right here. And this is tricky because check this out. Now we have this A right here. This is an interesting thing because it wants to, if we pop out this B right here, let me change color so you know what I'm talking about. If we pop this B out right here, right? Our ear is also going to want to pop out that A. It's going to want to hear that A. So instead of doing all of that, I would play this B down as if it were a stem down note, this one right here. And I would just basically think of the melody as missing that note, just like it's missing that one, right? So then we have, I'm just going to play the whole thing now, if I can even read it, now that it's all messy like this. We have the second measure. And I'm really backing off on this A right here. Why? Because it's so close in pitch to the D, to the melody note, that it really wants to cross over into melody zone, and it's not. Same thing with this B. I'm going to put a stem down on it and back it off. That way, if the ear wants to hear it, it's still there. It's just quiet. And then we're maintaining the same kind of rhythmic deal that's been going on through the whole first section here. If you ask me tomorrow, I might do this completely different. But as far as this sitting, this is the way I'm handling this right now. If we were in lessons together and you came next week and played it that way, there's a good chance I would say, do it the other way. And then you would go home frustrated because I'm contradicting myself. And I deal with that in my lessons as well, all the time with my coach. And it's because, as he says, those of us with minds are apt to change them, which is a very snide remark, but I just can't help loving it. So this we're going to play softly. This we're going to play softly. And so then we have, let's just go to a clean score here. We've got enough scores. We can have a clean one. So then this basically, we're turning this into a stem down and handling this as a tie, just as that one is, just as this one is. So then we have let me do that again. First one, again from the very beginning of the line, the balance issue. Long short. And then here, back off on that just quietly. And here, and so then this is very quiet. This chord right here, I would make that quiet for two reasons. One, because of what we just talked about in that A really wanting to pop out and get in the way of the melody. So we really want to get that. But also this line is going up as well. E, F sharp, E, from there. And so that's the way you wanted to handle the bass line anyway, with our rule of if things go up, get quieter. If they go down, get louder. So that's the way to handle those. The other thing is this offsetting that right there. Now because it's going down and we're going to crescendo anyway, we get to set it apart and we get to crescendo it. And that's my favorite. And down, boom, rum, da, bring it out, down, ba. I think it's much sexier that way. Really kind of dig into it. It also, here's another thing. Whenever we're constantly getting quieter and putting things quieter, there's a tendency for some people to not get loud enough, and then all of a sudden everything you're playing is just very quiet and it's very difficult to hear anything. And there's also a lot of tension in it and everything. You have to take every opportunity to get loud so that then you can take every opportunity to get quiet again. It's a balance. So if you have the opportunity to lay into something, that, I mean, it can't pop out ridiculously as a big accent all the time because that stops the thing as well. But if you can really lean into something, well then take that opportunity and lean into it. Like go big. Because we need that so that then we can contrast it. Such as right here. Ba, ba, that ba really contrasts. That I would just spend some time on that measure alone. We have long short right here. Why? Because we have this string of eighth notes following a longer note right here. So the first one's going to be quiet. So backing all the way up to the beginning of that measure. D, that quiet chord. C sharp. And then long short. And then crescendo the line. Yes? And then you're back to the very beginning again. From here then, we're basically on to the A section again, which is our repeat of that thing. We should notice the difference. Crescendo this line like crazy, yes? Da, 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 boom. This is your arrival of this line. Crescendo that line like crazy, but save toward the beginning of it so that then you can pour it on as you go. Really good crescendos don't happen linearly. So it's not that the first note is quiet, then the next one is specifically, and then it goes incrementally. Unless you're playing Bolero or something like that, Ravel's Bolero, then you want it incremental. But oftentimes with these little lines like this, you want them to compound exponentially at the end. So you go da 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 da. It's like an elephant gun or like the trumpet or something, to where it's like it's going along and it's getting a little bit louder, but then it starts getting a whole lot louder toward the end. So we have, wow, that was really bad. Let me play that again. Well, now I'm not even playing it very good at all, but you get the basic picture. So that you really pour it on those last few notes. Those last, like these right here. You really start to pour it on at that point. So save a little bit toward the beginning side. Then you're basically just off and running with the last line, which is you've already put the hard work in on. Again, you have this issue right here, which is now that we have a a stem up note on the third beat, just like we did up here. And so we could just say, okay, well, we just took it out in the other places. We're just going to take it out here as well. Or you could say, no, let's actually look at this into its own merit, which is a better idea, and say, is there a good reason to play this as a stem up note? Just looking at it, check this out, looking at it from the top and how it is similar to the top. Then we have, this is an E on the third beat. Well, this is an E on the third beat as well. We're just happen to be dropping this low E in as well. And so the question is it still this same E, but we're just also adding a bass note, and just for the sake of making it easier for the typesetter or whatever, that they're putting it stem up, or it's just a mistake or something like that? Or do we actually want to hear that as a melody note? So I'm just going to back up just a little bit, couple of measures, and just get into it. Sorry. This is completely your call. It could go either way. I would probably stick with it the same way that I was doing it up here and not bring too much attention to it, or maybe just keep it a little flat or something. But you could go either way with it. You could really bring it out as the big upbeat right before this, so that then that would really bring attention to this whole beat right here. Let me just get a clean score. So it would bring attention to this beat right here, right? Being the last upbeat before the end of the song, this one, right? The big 5-1-5 chord going to the 1 chord. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just ignore it. You could do it that way, and then that would make sense. So that it's your big 5 before the end. It could make sense that way. It could also make sense as exactly like we did it on the front side or on the top up here. So do it both ways. Do it as many ways as you can come up with, and see what works for you best according to your mood. Be able to do it both ways. Be able to downplay this E, or be able to make it actually work within the melody and make it sound right to do. Beyond that, I think that we have gotten most of the issues happening within this song here. Well, that's a whole bunch. That was long. If you stuck with this, congratulations to you. You have the focus of a very focused person. So thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to this channel. Go by classicalguitarshed.com and subscribe to that as well if you like to. And check out the links below. Definitely the 7 steps to learn any piece. Definitely do that. And then you can also add any of this in. Just one more note about that. Oftentimes, if you know these 7 different steps, doing the rhythm is one of them. And a lot of the stuff that we do right here, you can do that in a large part in that step. I think it's the 3rd step. It's before you actually even start playing it. You can do it there. You can do a lot of this work there. And then whenever you can actually learn it right into the piece, instead of learning it in your hands and then doing all this stuff that we're talking about, you can actually do all this within that rhythm section and then look at it in that point, and you're basically learning the piece before you even have it in your hands, but you're making these musical decisions so that then whenever you play the hands separately, which are the next couple of steps, that you can actually use the correct dynamics, articulation. You can be doing the things that you ultimately want to do within the piece. And so it's to do all this in tandem is really nice. You don't have to do that, and you don't have to do all the 7 steps and learn it in your hands perfectly and then come back to do this. You'll actually learn the whole piece better by putting it together and doing it at the same time. Although it will be a whole lot more work on the front side, and it'll take a lot longer on the front side. You'll ultimately be a much better player though. Thanks so much for watching. See you next time.